I went complete bankrupt during the heights of a gambling addiction. I had lost over $140,000 in the course of 4 years. I had lost numerous assets from houses to cars. So that goes to show how serious a gambling addiction or any addiction at all can be. So I want to discuss in this video how I was finally able to quit the addiction for good after years of struggling with it and relapsing and going back and forth. And I believe a lot of these principles that I use to quit gambling can be applied to any form of addiction, honestly, because when you look at the root of them, the same dopamine pathways in the brain, the reward system in the brain, all addictions go back to that same reward system. So before we get into the list, I wanted to talk a little bit about what addiction is in the first place. And I like Gabriel Mate, his definition. He's like a physician who he has a lot of good books on like parenting, trauma. If you have kids, you should definitely get his book, Gabriel Mate. But he says addiction is a psychological and physiological behavior in which a person finds relief in something or pleasure in something, and therefore they crave it, despite having negative consequences from it and not being able to give it up. So it's when a person craves something, maybe some type of behavior or some type of substance or something, and they get relief in it. They get pleasure in it when they indulge in it, but it ends up having negative consequences long term and they can't give it up. And addiction could be anything. A lot of times people just consider it, like hardcore stuff, and they really kind of negate or overlook the behavior type of stuff. But anything can be an addiction. Gambling is a behavior addiction. A person could be maybe having an unhealthy addiction to food. If a person is, 100 pounds overweight or something like that, and the doctor's saying, hey, you're starting to have these problems with this, this, and this. Now you need medicine. Now you need this. Now you need that. And then the person still is unable to, have a healthy lifestyle or cut back on eating unhealthy foods. It's a behavior addiction. You crave it and it gives you pleasure and relief. The unhealthy foods do. And on that same token, it's having negative consequences. It's affecting that person's health. So it could be maybe alcohol. It could be other behavior stuff like, TV, Netflix, different stuff like that, video games. Like a lot of this stuff can become addictive also. So I wanted to elaborate a little bit on what addiction can be. I've studied a lot of different books and a lot of different, people, the top people, researchers. So a few of my favorite quotes on addiction are, addiction is when a person does not want to be present in their own life. So their own life is so painful or they're so unhappy with it that a person can seek to disconnect from their life. So a person is seeking to disconnect and escape their life for one reason or another. Maybe it's some type of trauma they went through. Maybe it's their unhappiness with this thing or another thing. And then the ways people seek to disconnect, oftentimes those things can make a person feel relief and pleasure, but they end up harming them long term. Another one of my favorite quotes on addiction is, the opposite of addiction is not sobriety, but rather it's connection. And that's so true. A lot of people think sobriety, but really you will gain sobriety if you can learn to connect with yourself and love yourself and have high self-esteem. All these things we're about to be talking about. When you can learn to do that at a high level, you realize you don't need any substance. You don't need any behavior. You don't need anything to help you escape. You don't need any unhealthy coping mechanisms because you just love yourself so much that you can just deal with stuff in a healthy manner. But that brings us to the first one on today's list that I use to overcome my addiction. And that's cultivating and creating a deep level of self-love for yourself. That's raising your self-esteem, having high self-esteem. That's raising your self-worth, how you think about yourself. It's having a level of belief. You have to have self-belief that you can overcome it, that you do deserve better things in life. Another one that's very important is creating a place for self-forgiveness. You have to learn to forgive yourself. So this first one is very important because it combines all these elements together. You see, we can talk about it from a level of belief first. So you have to believe you can really overcome the addiction. You have to believe that you can live a better lifestyle. I know for me, when I used to think that I couldn't overcome the addiction, what do you think would happen? I wouldn't overcome it. When I thought I needed all this other help and stuff like that, or I couldn't do it, or I needed somebody to help me do it, I needed family members or whatever, partners, I needed other people to help me do it, and I couldn't do it on my own, what do you think happened? I couldn't do it on my own, or I thought I couldn't do it by myself. But once I started believing in myself, once I started believing I deserved a better life, once I started believing I can overcome it and conquer it, I was able to do it. And in order to do that, you have to combine all these things, because you have to learn to let go of the past and forgive yourself. So forgiving yourself is a deep level of self-love. It's one of the deepest ones. See, if you made a bad decision the day before, you had maybe months or even years for some people. If you had years of this behavior, this self-sabotaging behavior, or this behavior where you hurt other people also because of your addiction, it's not easy just to sweep that under the rug. And you can get caught up in that cycle where you just maybe believe like you're just not deserving of a good life. I know how it is, because that's how I felt for a long time. And that's why I would continue on these negative cycles, these harming cycles. But if you think about it, if you really love somebody, then what do? You forgive them. You know, we all have family, friends, or people we were in relationships with where we forgave them for things. Whereas if it's just some stranger or somebody you don't really care about like that, and they do something that maybe wrongs you in a way, what do? You can just cut them off and not talk to them again. But when you love somebody, you extend that grace to them. You give yourself an opportunity to forgive them. You give them a chance to make things right. And you have to do that with yourself, more importantly than anybody. If you love yourself, then you will forgive yourself. You have to let go of the past. You can't change the past, even if it's yesterday. I can't change something I done 5 minutes ago. Honestly, I mean, if you think about it. So why would you dwell on the past? Why would you not forgive yourself? You have to forgive yourself. And that's a form of self-love. You realize loving yourself is forgiving yourself. So then another one is you have to raise your self-esteem. I was listening to another book on addiction before, and it was talking about the core, a lot of times, of addiction is a person has low self-esteem. And I believe that to be true, because when I think about it, you know, when you're unhappy with yourself, when you feel like you're just so low as a person, or you feel like, man, I'm not doing what I'm supposed to be doing in life, I'm not where I'm supposed to be, look at these patterns and these things I keep doing, I keep letting this addiction, you know, control my life and all this stuff, then you have very low self-esteem. I know, because I've been there, and that can be a very dark place to be in. So you have to start raising your self-esteem. And how do you do that? You do that by creating this self-love, creating this self-belief, and start taking it one day at a time. The actions. What can I do today that's in alignment with who I want to become in the future? And that's really all you have to do. You have to think positively about yourself. You have to work on the person you want to become, not the person in the past, the person you want to become now and in the future. You have to start respecting yourself. You know, I respect myself too much to continue on this path of destruction. I love myself and respect myself too much. I'm not going to keep going through these same cycles anymore. So that's that first one, and it's one of the most important ones, because until you can really start doing all this stuff on a subconscious level and be intentional about it, I found for me, I would do okay for a little bit if I tried to stop, but ultimately I wasn't healing on that core level. I was never really dealing with the internal problems, with the self-esteem, with the self-respect, with the self-love. It wasn't until I really started creating that for myself that's when I was able to give up the addiction. And I believe that's a space where most people can also begin to give up the addiction. So the second method I used to give up addiction was I had to burn the boats. And I love this concept. So burning the boats, if you've never heard that concept before, it goes back to like a history reference in which people set out to conquer a land. And when they went to conquer the land, the leader of the group said, set all the boats on fire. So they set all the boats on fire, and they could no longer retreat back to the boats. So what did that make them do? That made them have no choice but to conquer the land. They had to succeed. And so many times in life, this doesn't just apply to addiction, but you can use it for anything in life. Maybe a person's goals or aspirations. They always give themselves, I used to do this in the past where I would try to do something, but if it didn't work out, I would always retreat instead of staying the course. Instead of grinding through that emotional and mental part of the journey, I would always retreat. So with addiction also, you have to burn the boat. You have to stop putting yourself in a position where you can retreat. See, a lot of times I would try to stop, but in the back of my mind, I would never do the things I know I needed to do so that I could go back to it. And sometimes, you get so much pleasure and relief in whatever it is, it's hard to make a decision to burn the boat. It took me years to do it, I'm not going to lie. But burning the boat is really what changes your life. So for me, my burning the boat was banning myself from all casinos in my state to where I could no longer go on their property. If I go on a casino's property, it would be considered trespassing. Also, you can do stuff like have somebody you love and care about and trust, like they kind of control your finances. Hey, this is where my direct deposits go from my jobs. This is my bank account, and have them look over that on a monthly basis to make sure your money's not going anywhere it shouldn't go. Whatever it looks like, every addiction is different depending on what you would have to do. But you have to make a decision to burn the boats, to give it up for good. When I would kind of play with it and try to quit, but I would leave that door open for me to go back to it if I wanted to eventually, then what would happen? I would always end up going back to it. Honestly, I mean, that's just how it works. And when you can learn to burn that boat on your own, just because the stuff I talked about on the first reason, because you love yourself, because you respect yourself, because you have high self-esteem, that's the best feeling in the world. Because sometimes I would try to halfway burn the boats, but I wouldn't burn them all because I didn't really want to give it up. I didn't really have that high self-esteem yet. I didn't really respect myself yet. I didn't really, want to give it up yet. That's why it's important that you want to give it up. You do it because of the feelings and the mental clarity that you're getting inside. You want it for yourself more than anybody else wants it. You have to become the author of your own life. Like nobody can author your life for you. That's why you look at sometimes when people go to addiction centers and stuff like that, I think the statistics show that like almost 80 to 90% of people end up relapsing within the first year. I believe a lot of that sometimes is because people don't want to go on their own. Maybe their family or people who love them force them to go to, hey, if you don't go to addiction center, then, we're cutting ties with you or whatever it is. Or maybe the judicial system makes them go to some type of rehab. They didn't really make the decision on themselves to go. When a person, they decide to burn that boat and try to do it themselves, and that's when they can have higher chances of overcoming the addiction. Whereas if you just do it because people make you do it, you kind of always will retreat because you're not kind of dealing with the internal stuff. You're not raising your self-respect. You're not raising your self-esteem and the self-love and the things that we've talked about already. So that brings us to the third way in which I was able to give up addiction, and that is having the support system in a peer group. So those can be like two different things. So a peer group, I consider that like peer-to-peer mentoring or a peer-to-peer group where people who come together who have went through the same things in life. So like, for example, like alcohol anonymous meetings, gamblers anonymous meetings, most type of major addictions, a lot of times they have groups like that where you can look them up in your city and state and Google it, Gamblers Anonymous near me, Alcohol's Anonymous near me. And then most of the time when you go to those meetings, it's going to be a collection of people who are on the path of recovery or people who have already done it. I know for me, when I went to places like that initially, it was very inspiring because you have people who haven't gambled in 5 years. They haven't gambled in 10 years. And that's very motivational when you're trying to get through it and you're just now becoming clean. And also, most importantly, like those people have been in your shoes. They know what it feels like when you've made bad decisions over and over again. They know what it feels like when you've had all these different things that you sabotaged because of the addiction. Whereas your family or friends or coworkers or certain people like who want you to get clean, but they haven't been in those shoes, they want what's best for you, of course, but they don't really understand on that level. Whereas somebody who's did exactly what you have done and ruined their life in this way or that way before, they can help you on a more personal and a more resonating level. And yeah, the support group, that's the people you can trust, people who love and care about you, people who want you to get clean also. It doesn't have to necessarily be anyone who has struggled with addiction, but just anybody who loves you. Really lean on those people. Hey, if you're feeling like a person wants to relapse, or a person is having a tough mental or emotional day, having people you can call on, people you love and care about, that's very important in life. That's not just addiction related. If you're going through anything in life, naturally humans, we are social creatures. Like, we need human connection. Even though some people are more like introverted than others and need more of it than others, we all at the core, we are meant to be socially active with people. So it's not easy to overcome addiction. You need a support group. You need people you can call on, people that you can depend on, even if it's just talking to you for 5 or 10 minutes. No matter what it is, you don't want to be isolating yourself, going through it alone if you don't have to. It's hard to do that. You can end up in a dark place doing that. That's where a lot of bad things can happen in people's life, when they just feel so isolated and like they don't have anybody. And if you don't maybe have friends or family you can depend on like that, create people. Like I said, these type of people in these peer groups, a lot of times people will freely give out their phone number. Hey, if you need anything, call me. If you need somebody to talk to, call me. And it feels good to have that, even with strangers, people who don't even know you from a can of paint, but because they know your situation, what you're going through, they don't mind picking up the phone for you. So that's another important one, having the right support group in your life, having the right people who can influence you to do the right thing. That's important. So along with that, you have to cut out and eliminate people who influence you to do wrong, people who influence you to do the addictive behavior or the addictive substances. Like, you have to remove those type of people from your life and replace them with people who are doing positive things. So the fourth way I overcame addiction was just started focusing on my future self. I wrote down a list of who is the person that I want to become. Starting tomorrow, not 5 years from now. Sometimes you can look long term, but starting tomorrow, what does that person do? That's a person who, what kind of values and morals do they have? It's somebody who keeps their word. It's somebody who does right by people. It's not somebody who hurts people. It's not somebody who hurts themselves. Somebody who respects themselves. It's somebody who, is active in the community. It's somebody who doesn't just talk about their goals and aspirations, but actually puts the work in. So you have to think about the person you want to become. What are your goals? What are your family goals? It's somebody who is a present family man, somebody who is an active and present father. Like, all these different things, no matter what it is, ways that if you think about becoming the best version of yourself, what is it? And write that down on paper. You write that down on paper, everything you want to become, and start focusing on it. When you give up an addiction, like most people, addiction takes up so many hours of their life, so much space mentally and emotionally. Like, when you give up addiction and go cold turkey, you have to pick up new habits. You're going to have a lot more time now, and you have to pick up new habits. You have to pick up new hobbies and find out what you want to do. What's your purpose in life? What do you want to really pursue? And for me, that was just figuring out my goals, what I want to do, and just getting clarity and focus. I already had them before, and it's just when the addiction is running the show, like, everything kind of gets put to the back, while addiction kind of just runs a person's life. So yeah, you want to write a list down. Oh, also importantly, I have left it out on the burn the boats part, with the giving up stuff on burning the boat and actually cutting your ties to where you can't retreat back to it. Make a list. I made a detailed list of all the ways that gambling had affected me in a negative way. Like, all the stuff, not being able to financially do this, not being able to financially doing that, like not being present with my kids when I have my kids because my mind is on addiction. All these different ways that gambling affected me negatively, I made a list of it and I wrote it on paper, and you can keep it in your phone in your favorite section, put it on your wall. And anytime I felt like I had an urge or anything like that, or just whatever, gambling crisscrossed my mind or anything like that, I would read that list, and then I would reflect on those type of instances where I couldn't do something because of gambling. I couldn't travel because I wanted to. I couldn't do this. I couldn't do that. Like, all this list. And that helped me. And I still look at it to this day. I still look at it sometimes just as a reminder of what I don't want to ever go back to. And I encourage most people to do that also. So you have these two lists. You have a list of the person you want to become, the person you're working on becoming, to be the best version of yourself, to maximize your potential in life. And then you have the old you that you cut ties with, but it's always a part of you. But you don't look at it to start feeling negative or start feeling down, but you look at it as motivation to do good in the future. You look at it as motivation. Man, I never want to go back to that. Wow, I can't. That's kind of crazy. Just looking at the list, how crazy it is. All the stuff that I went through, all the stuff I put people through. I never want to go back to that. So you use it as motivation, not in a negative manner. So that brings us to the final one on this list that I used to get over addiction. And it was, having that faith. If you don't have a core faith about what you believe in life or the grand scheme of everything, and sometimes it's kind of hard to maneuver difficult parts of life. Like for me, with my faith, I believe everything happens. A core belief of my faith is everything happens for a reason. The good, the bad, and the ugly. A lot of people, sometimes they believe in God when stuff goes their way, but then when stuff goes bad or doesn't go according to plan, they say stuff like, why me, God? Or why does this have to happen? Or, stuff you see online sometimes, people saying, God, I know you don't make mistakes, but this has to be a mistake. Stuff like that. It's like you can't pick and choose when stuff goes the way you want it to go or doesn't go the way you want it to go. And that's for everything, like tragedies, major stuff in your life. Like I believe everything happens for a reason. A lot of times it's a test, and I believe with like the addiction part of it, for me, I believe I went through all this stuff because my purpose is high in a sense that, man, I'm supposed to really impact people. I'm really supposed to tell my story. I'm really supposed to help people who have gone through difficult things in life. Addiction is the hardest thing I went through in life, but I've also been through a lot of different things. And through my story, I have been able to help people. Like I volunteer with at-risk teens and stuff like that, and I tell them my story and a lot of the stuff that I have been through in life. I'm able to help them navigate their lives from the mistakes I made in life. So a lot of people, you don't have to go through all those mistakes to educate people. You can just do it from a different point of, hey, people who have made those mistakes in life. But sometimes, some of us will make a lot of mistakes in life, but those can make for the goodest stories. When people can see you can overcome some things in life. That's just what life is about, honestly, overcoming things and then being able to help people and tell people your story after the fact. So you have to have a deep faith in why things happen and trust the process. Believing you could overcome it and also that you can help others with that journey. Don't ever be selfish that you just want to keep things to yourself. I used to be, and a lot of it was the self-esteem, the insecurity and stuff like that. Now I don't care. My story is my story. Have I done a lot of things I regret? Yes, I have. Have I hurt a lot of people? Have I hurt myself? Yes, I have. But I believe it's all part of the story. I have been able to make it out of that. And that's what life is about. It's not about people acting like a lot of people, they only want to put out their best self, their best version of their self. A lot of stuff you see online, they just want to act like everything is fine and dandy, like they just are so perfect. When the reality is, everybody's not perfect. But I believe if you can be vulnerable, which that's what this show is about, and that's why it's called that. If you can be vulnerable, like that can help people. That helps you with your confidence and self-esteem too. You don't have to hide your past, and you can just say, hey, yeah, I went through all this stuff, and now I'm on the other side of it. But yeah, I went through it all. It's a part of my journey. And if people want to resonate with you about that, they can. If people want to judge you because of it, let them judge you. Oh well. Like oftentimes people judging you, it's often an internal reflection of how they feel about themselves. They maybe aren't happy with their lives, so as a result of that, they just get online and judge people all day. They just go to the comment section and just judge people. So you have to realize sometimes it's not even a reflection of you. Sometimes it may be, but it just comes with being vulnerable. You have to put yourself out there and stop worrying about what other people think. So those are my 5 things that I use to personally overcome addiction. I believe those things can also help other people overcome addiction. Millions of people struggle with addiction. I believe I can help people, hopefully, with my message. Hopefully this story helps people overcome their addiction. Like I said, these don't just apply to a gambling addiction. These concepts and stuff, they can apply. You can use them for any addiction. Of course, if it's certain substances and stuff like that, you have to do more stuff. You have to wean off certain things and get on other stuff and stuff like that. Like, of course, always seek out medical help and professional help when you can. But a lot of the behavior stuff and stuff like that, you can just apply these principles. At the end of the day, I found it's really healing your core, really raising your self-respect, your self-esteem, dealing with whatever you have to deal with. If a person needs to get therapy, you have to get counseling, like you have some stuff, some trauma you have went through that you never healed from. A lot of that times, like that type of stuff, like addiction is on the other side of it. When I see people with addiction, I often look at them and say, and not judge them, but I often say, man, what trauma has that person not healed from? What have they been through that they haven't been able to overcome mentally and emotionally yet? A lot of times it's trauma rooted, and then it's stuff where the trauma or whatever, it affects you at a core level where your self-esteem is lowered, your confidence is lowered. So it's about trying to find that happiness and peace with the past so you can become a better person in the future. So comment below what's your favorite one on this list, or if you have something else that was able to help you overcome addiction, or somebody you know who overcame addiction. What do you think the most important things were in helping them? Subscribe to become a part of the Vulnerable Tribe. On this channel, I will be talking about all different aspects of life, real life stuff, and just on a journey of improvement. And I want to help others. So subscribe to the channel.